Hello, Clement9 here with another Topic of the Week video. This week, I'll be talking about the Bayonetta games. This week's topic was submitted by Tumblr Anon, and their topic is: what makes Bayonetta 2 a great sequel and overall a great game in general? What did it add/improve from the original, from its mechanics, lore, plot, characters, etc.? Also, I agree with you, I prefer the short hair, lmao. Yeah, honestly, I think Bayonetta looks better with short hair. Now, I actually went back and was replaying parts of Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2 to sort of like compare how the games felt when I was playing them. And there's some stuff that I hadn't really thought about before, but I do have to say Bayonetta 1 feels a lot better to play. I don't know if it's the way that the gameplay works because you have things like the Umbra climax, and I think the torture attacks are, they function a little bit differently. But, most of it feels a lot better in Bayonetta 2 because when I was going back and I was playing them, I had more fun with Bayonetta 2. Even just using the base guns that you get at the start, just using those, and not the other extra weapons. I just feel like Bayonetta 2, I can't even put my finger on all the reasons why. Like some of them, it's like, okay, yeah, the way the Umbra climax, and you can do stuff like get a big boost of power real quick, but I don't know, playing Bayonetta 2 just felt better. Yeah, I mean, it's something I probably have to spend a lot of time like analyzing and digging a lot deeper into this, but yeah, there is a certain je ne sais quoi when it comes to Bayonetta 2. And I don't know if it's just that her moveset's different, because even though I actually compared it even playing with Scarborough Fair in Bayonetta 2, because you can unlock that, so I decided to play with that and see how it felt. And even playing with the Scarborough Fair, it felt better than playing with those same weapons in Bayonetta 1. Another thing that really feels like a significant improvement is the way they handle the items in Bayonetta 2. And as I was playing through parts of Bayonetta 1, I was realizing that I didn't really get many of the items, particularly like the healing items, which are kind of important because you can get into some sticky situations, but you can concoct stuff. Now, I played Bayonetta 2 before I played Bayonetta 1, and I didn't realize that concocting was a thing in Bayonetta 2. I ended up with all these, materials, and I was just like, what do you do with these? And I never knew. Now, I was collecting all these items. I can get the healing items and stuff, and not just the materials to use, because it costs quite a bit to get to make those items in Bayonetta 1. And you could actually do the same thing in Bayonetta 2, but you won't really need to as much. And I noticed that, you do get a lot of those items instead of having to craft them or buy them at Hell's Gate from Rodan. So I definitely think that's an improvement because I found myself running low on those very quickly. And then Bayonetta 2, I have them practically in abundance, which some of that comes from the amiibos and constantly scanning in amiibos and getting stuff. But, yeah, I mean, the amiibos, that's also a nice feature, because with Bayonetta 2, you can just scan in amiibos, and you can get a lot of items and halos and stuff. I ended up doing that as I was playing it, just like scan, like I had a whole box of amiibos, and I'm just like scan, all the halos. But that's a nice little touch you have in the game. And it's more fun, because I have a lot more fun playing that. And, once you get really good at that, once you have all those, once you get really good at the game, then I was bumping up the difficulty. And I ended up going up to, like, very hard. I think it was very hard in some cases. And I know I ended up going through the whole game again on hard after I completed it on normal, just because you get good enough at the game. Because I had so much fun playing Bayonetta 2. And there's a lot of little stuff that was changed. I mean, there's another thing in terms of mechanics I was thinking about. And I was thinking about this as I was playing back through Bayonetta 2, because I really wanted to talk about this. When you pick up the Angel's weapons after, you defeat them, they're a limited time use. You don't get to, use them for the rest of the level or anything. You can use them a couple of times or a handful of times, and then they just disappear. Now, I did notice this in Bayonetta 1 you can just use them and then they disappear after a couple of uses. In Bayonetta 2, they actually tie it to the Y button so that it's not just you can just press the attack buttons and then you use it. It's you press the Y button to use them, and so you can still regularly attack with your normal weapons. You just don't get the gun. You can't shoot normally. But and then they tie it to that, and most importantly, really, to be honest, is the biggest improvement was that you get a little bar. And it's just a little bar that appears on the side, and it shows you how many uses you have left. Because every time you use it, the bar starts going down and down, and then you can say, "All right, I'm almost done with this," instead of it just being so when is it done? I don't know. Like in Bayonetta 1. So there's a lot of little quality of life improvements like that. Another thing is that you can switch weapons on the fly, because I was trying to do that when I went back to Bayonetta 1. And you kind of get stuck with your weapons. I'm pretty sure you can't just change them mid-battle like you can in Bayonetta 2. Which is a little disappointing, because there were sometimes when I was like, oh man, I wanna change weapons, and you're like, Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can't even access the whole like sub-menu thing to even, concoct stuff in Bayonetta 1. But it's like, you don't really need to do that as much when you actually have more of those items in Bayonetta 2. But yeah, a lot of those changes were made, or improvements. I've seen a lot of people criticize Bayonetta 2 for removing a bunch of stuff in terms of moves and how it worked. And I'm not entirely sure. Like, I didn't notice much. I don't know, maybe it's just the way I've played, but I didn't really notice the difference. I mean, I've seen people specifically say that you can't launch opponents normally in Bayonetta 2, like you could in Bayonetta 1. But even when I was playing Bayonetta 1, I don't know, maybe if I'm just not as good with that, but I didn't really launch enemies all that often. And even when I did, I found it a little bit difficult to lock onto them. I mean, if that was something that was actually changed, and maybe maybe it's in Bayonetta 2 and I don't know how to do it, but if it's not, I can see them removing that to sort of like, since it's, kind of difficult to use. But if you can do it in Witch, because I know you can do it, I'm pretty sure you can do that in Witch Time in Bayonetta 2. But, I mean, this isn't an in-depth look at all the exact mechanics. I'd have to spend a lot more time researching that to go into details, but I think the changes made to the combat in Bayonetta 2 are definitely improvements, because the game feels a lot better. Now, in terms of the story, the lore, I think the big thing with Bayonetta 2 over Bayonetta 1 is that it does elaborate on certain things. Like, you get lore in Bayonetta 1, of course. Then you get lore in Bayonetta 2, and it's just talking about stuff with the Umbra Witches and the Lumen Sages. Shoot, I almost forgot that. I just played Bayonetta 2 again. But it does go into a little more details, especially when you get to characters like Loki and Aesir, and you start getting a little bit more things get a little bit fleshed out more. Like Bayonetta 2 really or Bayonetta 1 laid a foundation. Bayonetta 2 was like fleshing out some parts. You also get to see more about stuff about the war between the witches and the sages, particularly when Bayonetta goes back in time, because you got some like flashbacks in Bayonetta 1, but Bayonetta 2 is like Bayonetta goes back in time and fights alongside her mother against the angels that are attacking. So it was really nice to see that, and you can actually, some areas that you go through in Bayonetta 1, you actually go back in Bayonetta 2 during the time travel parts. So you can actually see, okay, this was the area that you fought in 500 years ago. I think it was 500 years ago. But, and then you can say, all right, then you passed that again in the current time. So that was really interesting going back, because I didn't really notice that at first when I first was playing through the games. Then I noticed, and I was playing again, I'm like, huh. It's the one thing was when you're running around, fighting. It's a little some details slip by you. I think one of the most important things that Bayonetta 2 does is that it makes Bayonetta 1's story better retroactively. Now, I'll be honest, the Bayonetta games' stories are not, like, they're not going to be winning any Oscars. Because it's totally, like, there's some parts where it just basically totally submits to the rule of cool. And it's just like, does this make much sense? Not really, but it's awesome. And considering that this is an action game, these are action games, yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, sometimes, especially with Bayonetta 1, it feels like there are parts of the game where it's just like, and we go from here to here. And it's like, there's not as much of a transition. I think some parts later. But I think it makes up for some of those, some of the weaker parts of the story, because there's a lot of parts where you're just running around killing stuff. Now, granted, I want to be clear. This isn't like Modern Ninja Gaiden paper thin plot. It's not like you're just suddenly, you go from Japan to a city to Rome where you're fighting werewolves. Why? Because just shut up and fight. It's like, it's not like that, because at the very least it's like, okay, we have a series of events that do connect to each other, and it does a decent enough job of going through the from event to event and area to area, and basically just throwing as many fights as possible. But Bayonetta 2, really, particularly in the case of Baldur, really makes some great improvements. Because when you meet Baldur in Bayonetta 1, he's just a bad guy. That's about it. He's bad. He's Bayonetta's dad, and he's bad. He's a douchebag. Douchebag Lord Supreme. But then you play Bayonetta 2, and you meet a younger Baldur, and he's not a bad guy. In fact, he's good. The worst thing he's doing are in revenge for the death of the woman he loved, Rosa. And it's like, oh. And then he deeply cares about Bayonetta, or Cereza. And it's like, oh. And you find out that the reason he's evil in Bayonetta 1 is because he made this heroic sacrifice and was basically possessed by an evil god, essentially. And it's like, oh. And you play Bayonetta 2, and it's like, oh. It's like after Bayonetta 1, you just want to punch Baldur in the face, but then afterwards, after Bayonetta 2, you're just like, Baldur, I love you, man. Just, oh. It's like all these feelings, and it's like, and then you go back and look at Bayonetta 1, and it's like having more context for his character. It's like, oh, wow. And that's what a good sequel does. It makes the previous games better. You can make previous stories better retroactively. Was that planned from the beginning? Maybe. It may have been something that was come up with for Bayonetta 2. But regardless, it makes Bayonetta 1's story better, because you have so much more depth to Baldur after playing Bayonetta 2 than you got from just playing Bayonetta 1. Now, that's the most one that's affected with, like, Baldur is easily the most one who's affected. I mean, I still love all the characters. All the characters are great, especially all the returning characters. Especially Enzo and Rodon and Luca. Seeing Jeanne in Bayonetta 2 as a consistent ally was really nice to see, especially since she started off as pretty much like an enemy in Bayonetta 1, before eventually, siding with Bayonetta. But then, of course, she dies, and you have to Bayonetta spends the game trying to rescue Jeanne's soul before she's lost in basically hell. So, the characters are great, and even Loki. I mean, I was honestly sure that when I met Loki was such a snot-nosed brat. I was just like, I was thinking, man, I'm gonna hate Loki, but I ended up liking Loki because he's kind of a brat, but then he doesn't get any slack from anyone. Bayonetta is constantly just like slapping down that ego, and it's just like, okay. It's like characters can be dickish, but they're getting their comeuppance and they're getting called out on being rude. It's like, okay, I can stand this. And Loki's not bad. I mean, he's not. I've seen a lot worse characters that have been just obnoxiously bratty. But he was handled pretty well in this. in Bayonetta 2. And you have Aesir, who's like the main villain of the game. And it's like, and he was good. You know, you have more stuff about the Paradiso and Purgatorio and Helio. Sorry, I just did that without thinking. But anyway, it's like you have all that stuff going on with the three different realities, and then you have the eyes of the world, and you have the whole stuff involving Bayonetta, you know, her eye of the world, and what happened to Baldur's eye of the world. So, and it was nice because they give you some resolution to some stuff in Bayonetta 1. Especially, you know, you actually get to see Baldur's official death in Bayonetta, the beginning of Bayonetta 2. Because it's basically like, here, this is immediately what happened, you know, when he crashed down. It's like, And then when you play through and you have full context, you understand what Baldur is saying there. And it's just like, gosh dang, like, this is a lot more emotional than it really has any right to be. And that's one thing I really like about the Bayonetta games. Even though there's a lot of ridiculous stuff, even though there's a lot of totally insane action, even though it's off the wall insane, and even though there's some plots that, you know, some parts of the story that are just kind of don't really make full sense, it's like it makes up for any of those any of the more ridiculous or nonsensical parts with a lot of heart. It's like it has some great moments, especially with Bayonetta 2 and all the context you get when you have Bayonetta interacting with her father, and it's like, oh, you have so much more to go on, and you have so much, it's really emotional seeing them interact. And it just works. It's good. And it's I don't want to repeat myself and say it's good, but it is good. It's really enjoyable to see that side of Baldur and see Bayonetta get that I would even say that closure with parts of her past. And she spent so long not knowing about her past, and now she's got, you know, she learns a lot more about who she is and stuff that happened in the past. And, you know, and even after Bayonetta 1, now she has this better closure in regards to stuff that happened with her father, and a great understanding of what happened to her mother when she died. So, and again, this is something that even when you go back and play Bayonetta 1, it's like, once you have the context for stuff like that, it's like, You know, I do admit, when I started playing the Bayonetta games, I was not really expecting that. I was not really expecting to care as much about the story and the characters. Because, I mean, shoot, the characters, you would think that the characters in an action game are not really ones you're supposed to get too invested in. But it's like, I feel like I care about everyone, even Enzo. Enzo, the obnoxious New Yorker who always says, forget about it. You know, because you especially have this little subplot going on with his kids and his wife, and it's like, man, I actually do feel for Enzo, even though he can be a bit of a dick. It's like, no, he cares about his kids. Like, man, he's sort of the dickish comic relief side character. But man, I still care about him. I care about him in Bayonetta 1. I care about him in Bayonetta 2. And, you know, that's something I do like about Bayonetta. It's like, I like all of these characters. And they even made me like Baldur. I didn't really care for Baldur as much in Bayonetta 1, but I care about him after Bayonetta 2. Because Bayonetta 2 took his character and gave him a lot more depth. So, yeah, Bayonetta 2 is... Okay, to sum it all up, Bayonetta 2's story, I think, is better than Bayonetta 1. Especially because it's not only good on its own, and I enjoyed it on that, you know, on its own merits, but also because it does improve Bayonetta 1. And a good sequel really should do it. You know, a good sequel should make you look back at the older, you know, entries and enjoy it. Not like it less, because, you know, some series do that because they end up having bad, you know, entries and bad endings and stuff, and you look back at the beginning and you're just like, It's like, yeah, that's what Bayonetta 2, it's like, wow, no. It makes Bayonetta 1 better. It's not like it just took it and moved forward with the story. It's like, no. We're moving the story forward But hey, there's some other stuff that was going on in Bayonetta 1 in terms of context that you didn't know. Now that we know them, it actually makes going back through some of Bayonetta 1, it's like, oh wow, now that I have more context for this, it's like, oh, good job. And, you know, in terms of mechanics, yeah, it just works. Bayonetta 2 feels better, and it feels good. I enjoyed playing Bayonetta 2 more than Bayonetta 1. And I'm sure that maybe it's because I don't know if it's maybe because I played it first, and that's initially what I got used to. But even playing a while of Bayonetta 1 and then going back and playing Bayonetta 2, I still prefer Bayonetta 2. Now, that could really be chalked up to personal taste. There may be some people who really prefer playing Bayonetta 1. And that's fair enough, you know. Some people just it may just feel better for them the same way that Bayonetta 2 feels better for me. But all I'm saying is I think Bayonetta 2, it plays better. So yeah, I think that's about it for this topic. Trying to keep this succinct. So if you want to submit a topic to me, you can comment below. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Tumblr, you can send me an ask and put topic : and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure to follow the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. So are there any thoughts you have about Bayonetta 2? Please comment below. And thank you for watching.